Hey everyone, welcome to week 29, day 3. This is Wednesday. This is our ongoing push week. So, Monday, we painted Danny over there, preparing some soup. Tuesday, we painted Danny over there, who had just woken up. And today is going to be a kind of special day for me, and we're going to push things in a little bit of a different way. So, we'll see how that goes. Go Reds. Okay, let's get started. Now, this is our third day on our push week. And just to do a tiny recap, on Monday, we wanted to push the relationships within the image. So it wasn't only just about the distortions in the proportion of the figure. Those are very evident. Danny's head is outstretched and it's very elongated, while her shoulders are very wide, and then her hand, specifically her right hand, the one that is closer to us viewers, is actually pretty big. It's way too big for the size of her head, and yet it is a little too small for the width of her shoulder. So there's a bunch of inconsistencies throughout the description of the body. But there's also something kind of off and kind of a little bit weird. It's not as evident, but it is still a little bit askew in the relationship between the figure and the environment and the space she is occupying. So there's a really cool relationship between the awkwardness of the figure and the way the space is presented to us. Those are very formal qualities of the painting, and if we put them together in a sort of choreography that is trying to be a little bit balanced, then the image itself by the end is supposed to open up a few possibilities. So instead of seeing, like I said on Monday, instead of seeing Danny just pouring some soup, we feel that this is a very kind of strict, almost artificial ritual going on. The sort of mundane, quotidian quality of just cooking turns into something that is apparently a little bit stranger. Now, yesterday, I wanted to emphasize that we don't have to exaggerate a ton of things when we decide to push something. Pushing doesn't necessarily mean that if you want to say something more loudly, you have to scream at the top of your lungs. That obviously is a possibility, but it doesn't mean that you have to do that always. You don't always have to crank everything up to the max just to get your point across. Sometimes pushing something means that we can get out of our comfort zone and we can say, let me try to do this a little bit more. Let me try to see if I can identify the essence of this moment that is moving me and see if I can interpret it through paint and if I can pinpoint exactly the translation that I'm doing into painting, then I can start kind of loosening up, within that definition of that translation. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but in essence, for yesterday's painting, I thought that the sort of initial chaos of our body just waking up and all the instances in our body and in what we wear that say that we are waking up. That's kind of like an initial state of us. Has to do a lot with lost edges and with very expressive contours or lack thereof contours. So I wanted to explore that and make that an integral part of the painting. So it obviously happens in the contour of the hair and it happens in the contour of the sweater, but it also happens, in the inside of the sweater. And also, for me, it was a little bit tough because I wanted to develop the portrait a little bit further, but I realized there was a character to it. And if I kept on just adding and adding for the sake of adding, for the sake of almost like proving to myself that I can paint this head in a more resolved manner, then it would have been a little pointless for the image. I think that top and bottom would compete a lot, and that we wouldn't really be aware of what was happening within the body, in those very expressive strokes, and then kind of spreading outward towards the very jumbled contour. I think if the portrait was further developed, then those two ideas would have competed. So it actually took a lot of restraint for me to say, I'm going to stop right now and just let it be. Just leave it here because that's probably what's best for the painting. Now, both on Monday and Tuesday, I think I concentrated on something that was quite formal. I mean, it was easily identifiable during the execution of the painting. Those are elements that you can very easily pinpoint and say, okay, what does it mean to exaggerate, to alter the form, to make it longer, wider, to give it more weight? Those things you can actually recognize, hopefully easily, when you do the painting. But for today, I thought we would do an exercise that is perhaps fundamentally different, but it has to do with pushing. And I decided to paint my father. Now, my father passed away 5 years ago. Last week was his anniversary of passing, and I obviously was thinking about him. And I thought about the paintings that I had done of him previously, and also my almost unwillingness to paint him after he passed. I think I was doing a painting when he got sick, and I never really wanted to touch it again after he had passed, but I kind of pushed myself to try and develop it a little bit further. And I ended up painting it, or painting it to a degree that where I felt, okay, this is fine, this is good. But I remember that maybe after a year, I ended up painting over it because I just thought it was I don't know. I don't know what I was grasping for. I didn't really understand what I wanted to do by painting my father again. I didn't know if I wanted to have a conversation with him. I didn't know if I just wanted to do this very traditional idea of a portrait that makes the memory of him almost materialize. And then you have a painting to remember him by. You would have this image to always look to and say, yeah, that's my dad. But I never felt comfortable. I never really understood the reasons why I was doing that painting before he passed and why I eventually ended up painting a little bit more on it. I never really understood why I had a desire to try and finish the painting after he had passed. So I had this conversation with myself and I reflected and I thought, I'm fine covering it up. I don't feel I'm disrespecting my dad or his memory or all the thoughts that I have about him if I decide to cover this up, which some people may find very disrespectful. That's kind of amazing to me that an image can have so much power, and even if you think about it, so much power over you, in the sense that it becomes almost untouchable because of what it ends up representing. So I hadn't really painted my father in the past maybe 4 years. I've had a desire to do it, but I don't know. I didn't really feel that I wanted to engage in a painting, particularly in a portrait, because I'm not sure what I would gain just by painting that portrait. Thinking of all the paintings that I thoroughly enjoyed doing with him, I was thinking of his reactions to my paintings. He always found something wrong with my paintings. I mean, I say this in the best of ways. It was almost like a challenge for him to find the areas of the paintings where I had trouble, and he would point them out. He was letting me know that that was his way of him understanding a painting, of him understanding my intent, and also knowing where I was coming up short. He was an incredibly intelligent man, and I'm not just saying this like the way people can talk about their parents or their loved ones. My father was intelligent. He was very, very intelligent. He was objectively intelligent. He was annoyingly intelligent. He had this way of solving everyday problems with a degree of common sense that it was just, ugh. It would make you feel dumb. It would make you feel stupid. Not him, but just the way in which he would find just this super easy solution to something that was incredibly complex in your brain was just annoying. It really was. I just can't find another word for it. But I respected him dearly for it. Now, because he was gifted with such an insane amount of intelligence, I feel, he had this trouble with people, I guess, that were not as intelligent as him. He had a lot of issues with people that wouldn't trust him and wouldn't trust his judgment. And many, many times, and this is what's most remarkable about my father, I think, he would just question everything. He would question even things that humanity had already, established as truths. Now, my dad would never take anything for granted. He would just question absolutely everything. Talk about somebody who would just literally think outside the box. He would think outside the box for the smallest of problems. I mean, he would recognize the easiest and most simple solution, but he would also just try to find just insane ways of trying to solve a very, very simple problem. And it was just about possibilities and it was just about observation. I think he was one of those people that have this natural sense of observation, particularly with nature. He absolutely loved nature. He loved looking at nature and learning from nature. He actually believed that everything that we need to know is kind of spoken by nature. And it's up to us to see if we're willing to pay attention and to listen to it. He was a remarkable person. Like I said, it was almost diminishing when you saw the degree of intelligence that he had. I don't think any of us, my brother and my three sisters and myself, we're never going to be as intelligent as he was. It was always something that we had to come to terms with. And like I said, it's his anniversary of passing. And I realized, well, I think I can paint him again, but I don't know if I'm ready to paint a portrait of him. I wanted to, yes, think about him, but, maybe in details that were sort of invisible, I guess. And when I thought about him, one of the things he would always do, because he had no appreciation for any established rules, and I didn't want to concentrate on like the bigger rules, these social contracts. I wanted to think about the smaller ones. He wouldn't eat things the way that you were supposed to make them. Like you would tell them, no, there's a recipe for that, Dad. You have to mix this, this, and this. And he would be like, no, I can add like 2 more cups of sugar. He would just make something up just because he felt that that was probably going to be a better version. And he was so proud that it probably tasted like crap, but he would eat it and say, no, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So one of the smallest rules he broke, and he broke constantly, was that he would go and take a nap or sometimes, just flat out fall asleep in bed with his shoes on. I was thinking about my father and I showed the painting to my mother and my sisters, and they all identified his shoes immediately. Like, that is my dad. The pants, the socks, the shoes, and the bed sheet, that was my dad. And they saw him. They saw the attitude. They didn't see the shoes. They didn't see, oh my God, those are your dad's shoes. They didn't see the object of my dad's shoes. What they saw was just the attitude, the person that decided to fall asleep with his shoes on and not care, not give a crap. I was thinking about the sort of smallness of my dad and not the bigness. Like I said, the bigness is almost overwhelming. This incredible character, this amazing scientist, this guy who observed nature and formulated a ton of theories based on his observations. Some of them insanely weird, others just absolutely brilliant. When I try to digest that idea of my father, I think it's so complex that that's what's stopping me from saying I want to look at a picture of him and look at his portrait again and see if I can paint him again. I realize how very difficult that conversation would be. But if I see him in the smallness of things, then I realized that I could do that I could speak about my dad and that I could speak about something that perhaps, nobody else will get. This painting was about pushing, but not pushing something in particular. Pushing doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take something and then just exaggerate it and bend it and stretch it and deform it and distort it to the point where it's almost unrecognizable. I mean, that is awesome to do. Let's be frank. That is also my bread and butter. And maybe tomorrow we'll do an exercise on that again. But pushing sometimes is also about pushing yourself into trying to confront something that has been difficult for you, and into trying to find almost an angle in which you can digest this conversation that you have to have with a painting and say, I think I can handle this if I do it through this idea. So perhaps it's about not obeying this very traditional thing where you would say, oh, I'm about to paint my father and I want to reminisce about my father because it is an anniversary of his passing. And the most direct way in which you could do it was go through your photo archives and just recreate this memory, materialize this memory, reconfigure all these facts and all these experiences into this one painting, hoping that enough time has gone by that you can look back at your father with freshness and objectivity. And I think that that's a very human way of doing something. But the idea of this week is to push ourselves into saying, well, what if I don't just stop there? What if I want to think about my dad, but I don't want to just paint a portrait of my father? I want to dig a little deeper. Now, perhaps somebody could say, well, dude, come on, it's still a portrait. His legs and his shoes, that's just your identity showing through the things that you wear all the time. Sometimes there's more identity in those things than in a portrait. But like I said, it almost even goes beyond the object of shoes. It's what this pose of his legs with his pants kind of up, showing his socks, and the crossed feet with the shoes. That was my dad. That was entirely my dad. But again, it goes beyond the posing of the legs, and it goes to a point where you start thinking about this person that just didn't care in a good sense. When I think about it overall, when I think about his life, he did get into a lot of trouble, but I think he didn't care about a ton of things. And this was one of the tiniest things he couldn't care less about. And I wanted to remember him for that. The smaller things, the fact that he would fight the smaller fights, I think that speaks a ton about him also. Today it was about pushing, but not in a very traditional way. It was about pushing to find how we can have a conversation, how we can find our way through something that is probably hard to paint, and that we can't rely upon the subject matter just making it easier for us. A little bit different, but again, like I said on Monday, pushing doesn't mean the same thing all the time. There are more kind of basic, predictable ways of pushing. I'm totally fine doing those. I actually enjoy those thoroughly. But there are other ways to push, which are deeply rooted and take a different sort of effort. It's not about recognizing how to formally distort and arrange shapes. Pushing can also be a deeply, deeply personal matter. And that's what we tried to do today. I'm super happy that I painted this painting. I feel okay with it, and that's very cool. I feel like I could speak about my dad, and I enjoyed it. And it was a very, very light conversation that I could have. So I think that was pretty cool. That was it for today. I will see you guys tomorrow, where we go back to distorting and arranging shapes and rearranging shapes, because that is kind of fun. So today it was a little tough, but tomorrow, we'll grant ourselves the ability to just have fun again. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you guys for hanging out. Bye.